So we're going to start today with Susan, and I'd like to say, can you start by telling us what we are seeing about how companies make executive level decisions today?
Great. Thank you for introducing us, Wendy, and thank you all for joining us. We picked this subject for a lot of reasons, but one of the best is that this is going to be one of the most important things that companies do to survive during this pandemic. It's always, decision-making is always important. It's even more critical now, and we're going to see companies start to separate from the pack. The better they are at making good decisions, not just at the executive level, but all the way down in the organization, the more likely they are to keep their people and the more likely they are to keep their customers. And I'll share a really quick example of a company I think that's fantastic at this. It's Costco. I bought a piece of jewelry from them 5 years ago, and one of the stones fell out this summer. And so I went to the customer service returns desk, and I said, I don't know if you can help me at all, but I bought this from Costco 5 years ago. Is there any way you can help me fix this jewelry? And the customer service manager said, I don't know either. I've never really done one of these before, but I know we really try to help customers out, so let me look into it. And bottom line, she took information, she took my piece of jewelry. 30 days later, it was repaired completely for free, and it looks better than the day I bought it, I think. So that's a good example of where companies have empowered their frontline people to make decisions that are right for customers. There's a spectrum of how companies make decisions. Some do it very well. Those are companies usually that have strategic planning processes that hold people accountable for a focused set of objectives and deliverables, and who value people and encourage them to take risks, make mistakes, and even assign mentoring and coaching to help as people work through planning and implementation and execution. These companies generally are popular with employees and with customers alike. They're consistent, they're reliable, and they're going to be well poised to take advantage of the opportunities that are going to present themselves to companies, particularly during this time. There are other companies that struggle with decision making. Sometimes it's because they have too many objectives on the plate, and the leadership doesn't do a great job of filtering down to the rest of the organization the priorities. That leaves people wondering, which priority am I working on today? In these companies, sometimes you see people circle around decision multiple times. The same decision goes up to the leadership, comes back, goes up, comes back. And all this time is being wasted and lost, and opportunities are not realized. These cultures can seem reactive. They can seem like they're firefighting. People are always in firefighting mode. And it's often difficult to retain good people in these kinds of companies. So that's why it's important to figure out how to improve your company's decision-making, not just at the executive level, but having that filter down all the way to the rest of the organization. So I'm excited for us to talk about that today and what some key ideas might be for you.
Great. Thank you, Susan. And how about you, Layla? What are you seeing?
I can speak to some of my industry experiences. Okay, so I'm coming from oil and gas, finance, banking. Those are pretty traditional decision-making hierarchies, right? And that's you got to go to your boss goes to the next boss, and so on up the chain of command, right? And COVID-19 and working remotely has kind of made that extremely difficult to accomplish, because now you can't walk down the hallway and find your boss anymore. You have to book a meeting and call them. So any company that's stuck in that kind of traditional hierarchy, pretty much behind and lagging in their decision making. They have to throw that out, that command and control chain of command to get information up and then back down again. This doesn't work in this type of situation. So the ones that are actually allowing that to be more free, you can call who you need to make the decisions. They seem to be performing better. But again, I'm coming from pretty traditional, very much, old boys network. I mean, this is you respect your hierarchy type organization. So there's a struggle there to switch into this crisis mode of getting decisions made fast. However, in another sector, and I'll just speak to, that kind of had it right to begin with, is the technology sector. So I worked in cybersecurity in the past. Those guys never really seem to have that command and control structure, because the smartest guy in the room is probably the youngest guy you just hired. And so that person does have access straight up to the executives because they don't want to talk to the middle management. That guy found the solution to the process problem or the data or the vulnerability, and that person is the one you want in the room. So this is kind of what I'm seeing, two sides of the coin. The traditional one is being flipped on its head now, and the tech companies kind of have an advantage because they never really had that in the first place.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Layla. How about you, Fidel? Can you tell us what companies are doing to make faster decision and gather relevant data just to address issues more quickly?
Yeah, so let me paint a picture here, Wendy. Coming into the recovery phase, usually you see inventory and delivery times are getting better, and it's getting a little easier to win new business, right? So what's the first priority coming out of this crisis mode? Well, it should be the same as during a strong economy. You got to focus on your customer. Deliver what you promised when you promised, right? So kind of as Layla pointed out, don't wait for your lagging indicators. Give you an example, real life example that I'm going through just now. A manufacturing company that I'm currently supporting here in the Midwest, they realized that their traditional staff meetings, which were lasting about an hour and a half, they were just ineffective because these were static reviews of past data. So what we've gotten them to do now is to change into a more progressive, dynamic, 45-minute stand-up meetings in front of the lean daily management board. And these boards have their key performance indicators, just one or two per each of the metrics, right, that are important to them. So what this allows the teams to do is to actively see and touch the issues before they become an impact to their customer, right? So the analogy, Wendy, imagine that you're in a car and you got to get from point A to point B. And, the one key measurement for you is, do I have enough gasoline to get to my destination? That's really important. Imagine that someone gives you a piece of paper telling you how much fuel you had last Thursday, right? How does that help you to make a decision today? It really doesn't, right? So what you need is in your dashboard to have the most recent information. You see your fuel gauge, it's a quarter full, and then it tells you your range is 150 miles. I got it. I am going to be able to get to my destination before I need to fill up. That's the difference. So having simple and effective decision-making metrics is critical.
Good. Thank you, Fidel. And continuing on those examples, David, how do you translate some of the changes from the front line to the executive leadership to accelerate decision making?
Well, a lot of it is going to, and it's interesting, a lot of stuff that's coming into play is traditional communication methods, and it keeps bringing up lagging indicators. So traditionally, you put things in lagging indicator format. So you think PowerPoints, that are sometimes 1 month or 2 month olds with just one line item that's been added, and saying that's and saying, well, the rest is about the same. So kind of moving from that to saying, okay, well, these are all working sessions and not meetings to discuss what we're doing. So even in the company I'm supporting right now, we're moving away from PowerPoint. So it's bare bones Excel sheets. And you would say, well, there's other tools and SAP and all these other tools that can do more sophisticated things. Well, that's the path that you have to be going down. So I would say in cases that I know of where companies already had that investment, where their SAP was integrated into an Excel or Excel-like tool, they're ahead of the pack. And so these other companies need to kind of get on that same train. The other thing is, one of the recommendations that I've been doing as I've been going around is, we think about value stream mapping and we think about it as a manufacturing. It really is more from an information standpoint. How fast can you get that information and how is it the acronym? So you think about how you have WIP, so your work in progress, and you have all this inventory of information. An executive is not going to have the time to go through a 500-page, as an example, deck of metrics. That's too much information. So a lot of stuff gets kind of lost in the shuffle where the meeting time runs out and you don't get to it. And so a lot of the things that I've been kind of focusing on is it's kind of using those same tools that you use for manufacturing for information flow. Because everybody knows about the buzzwords of machine learning and artificial intelligence, all those types of things. But at the end of the day, it's a process of getting the value, which is from the floor up to the decision makers. So really simplifying those processes, I think Fidel kind of touched on a little bit as well, actually going out to the floor. And then I like what Layla was saying when she was saying you got to get the information from the source. And why the tech companies are probably doing well is they're kind of shortchanging those middlemen or middle people, so to speak, in getting right to that information. But the same thing can be said for the actual data as well. You want to get it from the source, and you don't want to have those unnecessary queue times in between the two.
Okay, great. Thank you. How about you, Layla? What would you suggest to get the critical information up to executives quickly?
I can give maybe two thoughts on that. The first one is relatively easy to do, but yet probably won't be done that easily. So the way I say that, first thing you could try to do, you don't need a Six Sigma consultant, it's why don't you try turning off all your reports and see who shouts the loudest saying, hey, where's my data? Because what we found is people are inundated with data that's probably irrelevant. And yes, maybe some of it gets built into something that's actually useful, but there's a lot of data floating around, a lot of reports. Back in the 1990s, one of my first process reengineering efforts, back in those days, that's what we called it, we had thousands and thousands of reports that were being generated across 5 divisions of a multinational corporation. So we decided as a reengineering team, we're going to turn those off and wait. And the silence was golden because most reports nobody even missed them. We had probably in the immediate need about 30% of those reports were asked to be turned back on because of certain aspects of the data. And the remaining, we reached below 50% to come back only after we hit a quarterly milestone when suddenly, oh, it's the end of the quarter, where's that one piece of data I needed? So we eliminated more than 50% of the noise. Imagine how many people are working on that. The processes involved to pull the data, collate it, get it in a spreadsheet, put it on a nice report, roll it out, and get it. That was back in the 1990s. You knew nothing was easy back then. We had mainframe computers getting the data. So just imagine that today data is so much easier to grab, and we're still probably asking for thousands and thousands of data points that we don't really need. So that's one thing you can try. Turn them off. Don't request them. The second thing kind of piggybacks on what Dave was talking about, getting the right person involved, giving you that data. So I'm going to say something that sounds a little counterintuitive, but it's almost like try involving more people. In other words, reach out, redesign your traditional way of data flowing up, and build a RACI. So who's responsible for the data, who's accountable, who do you consult? Build that up, see what it says today, and invite all those people into a virtual fishbowl. And by that, because we got to be digital these days, they all show up to discuss and decide, is this the right way to get this data together? Don't go up and down the command and ask that. Put them all in the room and process re-engineer how you get that data. And you'll find those people that are pulling the data, they don't even know why you're asking for it, for one. Second of all, you put it to you. So when you hear that, you start to re-engineer and say, we really don't need to make life that difficult. So this is how you streamline it. You have fewer decision makers, more stakeholders that are involved in the process, and you'll redesign it. And so that takes a little more effort, but I think that's the best and fastest way. Get them all together in one session to discuss why you need it, how is it coming from it, and then re-engineer and find out a better way.